Good sleep is everything. That's why Ollie's science-backed support is made with a blend of melatonin and L-theanine for both kiddos and grown-ups. So when your mind won't switch off, you've got something that can help. Your racing thoughts and restless nights won't stand a chance. Find Ollie Sleep Solutions for the whole family at ollie.com. That's OLLY.com.
There's a kind of loss that doesn't feel like loss. It feels like a door finally swinging open. For Laurie, that moment came in the form of a fire, a neighbor's forgotten French fries, and a wall of diaries standing untouched in the smoke. Everything else was gone. But hundreds of volumes of her own handwriting were not. Laurie shares how that fire became the strange, unplanned beginning of understanding who she actually was, and how reading her own story as it belonged to someone else gave her back something she hadn't known she'd lost.
I had broken up with a fiance. I'd forsworn dating for a while so I could take care of myself. So there were I'd crashed my car like a month before. So there was a lot of destruction in my life that it was almost like God lit a match the finale will be to burn down your house. That'll be the perfect, complete burning down of every aspect of your life as it is.
You're listening to the Life Shift Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Gilhooly. This show is built around one simple idea, that sometimes a single moment can change how we see everything. Each week, I talk with someone about the moment that shifted their life and how they learned to live differently after it. These are not stories about having it all figured out. They are stories about what it looks like to keep going once the story changes. Thank you for being here. Here's today's story. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Life Shift Podcast. I am here with Laurie. Hello, Laurie.
Hello, Matt. How are you?
I love doing this podcast, and I look forward to doing this podcast. And at the same time, as a creator, it is a lot of work on top of having the regular 9 to 5. So it's like one of these things where you're like, I'm tired, but now I'm going to go get energized and do this. And then it's like the end of the night when it's done. So that's how I am. How are you?
Very good. Very well. Thank you. I think I'm 3 hours before you. So it's only 3:00 my time, but 6:00 your time.
Well, you have the rest of your evening to yourself. So I just want to say thank you for wanting to be a part of the Life Shift Podcast. This has been a very unexpected journey for me over the last 4+ years, being able to talk to people all around the world about these very specific, oftentimes life shift moments. From one second to the next, there is a clear before and after of the human. And I've heard so many different life shift moments, so many different stories and experiences. Yet what I've learned, and it sounds so cliche, but I've learned that there are so many similarities in the way that we feel about these moments, or, how we process these moments. And it's been like this really beautiful thing of learning how powerful humanity is and how connected we are. So Thank you for just wanting to be a part of this.
My pleasure.
So before we get into your story, maybe you can, well, definitely you can, tell us who Laurie is in 2026. Like, how do you show up in the world? How do you identify these days?
Okay. Well, I was a counselor for many years, 17 years, and now I'm a memoirist. I've published one memoir, and now I'm publishing one next year. And so I guess I'm also a caregiver. I'm caring for my 97-year-old mother, so I do that as well. And so that's how I present in the world, I guess, as a caregiver and as a memoirist.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, kudos to you too for showing up for your mom and caring. I'm sure that is challenging, as well as probably a beautiful thing that you can and are doing for her.
Right. Well, yeah, I think it works for her and for me and for her giant dog, which is right next to me.
Yeah. I think that is something that a lot of people are not made out for. And so I commend people that are able to do that, able to show up for people that need us, and like the way that they maybe did for us when roles were reversed.
Right. Definitely. I can be the caregiver for just as many years as she cared for me. Right.
Exactly. Well, congrats on your book and
Thank you.
congrats on your upcoming book. I know that's no small feat either, right?
Yes, definitely.
How long was the journey to put together the first one?
About 14 years.
Oh, wow.
Because
Okay.
I wrote it, in a writing class and then, edited and had a writing coach. And so, but the second book only took 2 or 3 years. So I'm
Okay.
getting faster. Yeah.
Well-oiled machine now, right?
Right.
Pretty soon you'll be cranking them out like James Patterson.
Right. Yes. Well, he's got a whole crew, I think, is on the assembly line there.
Yes. So let's get into your story. Maybe you can paint the picture of your life leading up to the main pivotal moment that we're going to center today's conversation around, fully understanding that we have many of them as we go through our lives.
Right. Well, I moved to LA in my early 30s, thinking I needed more of a challenging, sophisticated environment. And I was a freelance journalist and a writer in a publishing house, and then media relations, and worked at a convent. And I had all these.
Convent?
Yes, I worked at a Hindu convent for
That's
3 or 4
awesome.
years
Wow,
as a writer.
I hear that.
And so I've sort of had my life was in 5 or 6 year increments where I would sort of change my hat and change my career. I wasn't the kind who had one career at 16 and did it at 66. So I had various careers. And so that was sort of where I was at. I was living in Santa Monica, and then there was the pivotal moment that I guess
don't jump into it yet. I'm very curious about the before even all that. Like, was your upbringing were you someone that was always changing and trying different things and being adventurous, if you will, in that way? Because it feels like so many of us are brought up thinking like we need to pick our career right now and we need to stick with it.
Right. I think that definitely all my career, I was sort of like a secrets farmer, farming secrets, but each career had that one commonality. So it wasn't like I was, like a pharmacist one month and I was, a ditch digger the next month. Every career I had as a market analyst, as an investigative journalist, were all having to do with unearthing secrets, and including at the convent where I was sort of unearthing secrets about the spiritual realm surrounded by Hindu nuns. So that was the commonality. And that's why it works so well with the memoir, which is really about finding the secrets of your life and weaving them together into a whole that tells you something about yourself and also to your audience. So
what drew you to uncovering secrets? Was there, like, I'm not trying to dig into your childhood, but at the same time, it's really, I often feel like a lot of the things I do now are because of the things that happened to me, in my case, losing my mom at 8, changed my life. And it's the way that I approach things because of that experience.
Yes. I think, it's interesting to look at what a child is doing with their free time, because I think it tells a lot about what you will become as an adult. And, I got a little Instamatic camera when I was 8, and the kind that the flashbulb hits you when it burst, that kind of thing. And I would, instead of taking pictures that were pretty or about my family, I would take pictures and study them as if I could find the secrets that were frozen in that moment. And so there was that kind of being a little detective, even as an 8-year-old. What can I learn about this person when they're frozen in time? And I think that hasn't left me, and it's just taken a lot of different professional forms since then.
It sounds like a thread of curiosity is definitely always.
I think so.
Were you the kid that was like, why?
Right. Yeah.
Well, take us on. You said you moved to LA in your 30s, you said?
Yes, in my early 30s, like 32, 33. And, I got a job at a publishing house as a copy editor. And so there was definitely a sense of a career ending and a new one beginning. Like with writing about, as a journalist, I didn't feel like I was effectuating change in the world. I was just writing about something. I wasn't being a growth catalyst. So that's why I went into media relations, where I used writing in all these nonprofit situations where I was generating change with what I was writing about. So I worked at the school district and the convent, and I worked at Hilton Foundation. So I was using my writing as a way to be of service to others. So there was that. So every job has had like a little component that the other job didn't have. That's what caused me to move on.
Yeah. So you you've moved into a place where you're now using your skill and your curiosity and all these things to affect change. So where does that take you?
Well, interesting. I mean, this first memoir, I think, is sort of like my practice book. I mean, it shows the reader how, you can kind of, how did I find my sacred contract, my calling, eventually as I meandered through these many careers. And so I'm hoping my reader can do the same with their life. I use journals as the tool to discover that, but for the viewer or reader, it may be something else. But I think as the world's becoming more chaotic, people are trying to find their ballast, their reason they were born. And that's what my first book is about.
Yeah. So what was it? What was your life shift moment? Like, it sounds like you're very curious beforehand.
Right.
What triggered you?
Well, I was living in Santa Monica, and my neighbor neglected her French fries and burned down her house and mine too, and everything burned except my tall shelf of 300 volumes of diaries. And so I felt like God was saying, I spared these in the fire for a reason, which was to have you read about your life and learn something about them. So there was many things were burned, but not the diaries. So that was sort of the life shift moment.
Yeah. So walking into what one would assume would be huge devastation, which I'm sure it was at the same time. Yet this was like this beam of light standing there in the room of like, your story is still here, because those are all your diaries, right? Like,
they were all my diaries. Yes.
So that's
yeah.
There's some metaphor that happens there with of that you're still standing essentially.
Yes. Right.
Preserved.
Yeah. That here's this cache that you've not of information about you that you failed to really capitalize on, that you need to now. And so I began to read one volume every night, and to see, looking at myself sort of like a character in a novel, like how is this character changing or not, or the challenges, are they moving her into a better direction? So it was really telling to look at myself from the outside looking in. Oh my gosh, look at this character, and she's suffering or she's succeeding, and learning something about myself in that process.
Yeah. How far back did these diaries go?
It went from the age of 18.
Okay.
I started when I was 18. And so now I write one volume a month, but back then it was, less volumes. I just wrote everything. But it was like seeing a jigsaw puzzle with tiny little pieces that needed to be put together into a whole. Each of the diary entries were fascinating, but they needed to be assembled. And that's what the memoir was about, was taking these thousands of pieces and trying to understand what the story was meant to be told by these little jigsaw pieces.
Yeah. As you start, I guess the first question I have is, had you intended to do this before that fire? Or were you just journaling and, putting your thoughts together, just maybe someday you'll look at them?
Yeah, I think it never occurred to me to use them to write a memoir, or to excavate them as if they were archaeological relics that needed to be unearthed to learn from. It was more like a place to vent, or, like, oh, I'm upset, I write about it. So it was more like a healing thing than
right. Yeah. Which makes it even more interesting, I would imagine, because there wasn't the intent of, let me document all this so that someday I can use it to put together a book, right? This is more raw, I would imagine.
Yeah, you're right. It was less formula. It was just the raw feelings and thoughts that had no purpose,
right?
Than the exorcism of them. So in that regard, it's good, because it wasn't like I had a pre-plan in mind for what so there's you're right, a freshness, a rawness about it.
Were there big surprises to you reading back your own story?
I think so. I mean, a lot of people, chastised me because I didn't do the traditional route of having 2.2 children and getting married and all that. And so I felt a lot of shame about that. But when I was reading my diaries, I thought, oh my gosh, look at this woman. I have these, I'm very exploratory. I've earned 3 college degrees. I go to psychic college. I work at a convent. It was like I was looking at myself. Okay, yeah, I didn't do the 2.2 children thing, but I have other qualities instead, So I I didn't have as much self-hatred after reading the diaries. I had more of an appreciation of what I brought to the table.
Yeah. So you would say going into it, you assumed that shame that society puts on us for not following whatever path we think society wants us to follow.
Right.
And now this allowed you to see yourself differently.
Yeah, it did. It was like I wasn't having to look at myself through the lens of another person. I could see myself through my own lens. And there was oh my goodness, things about me that no other person said, but I said about myself in my diary. So it was like therapy in that regard, in the sense that the therapist theoretically can look at you with fresh eyes. I could do that with my journal.
Yeah. And I would imagine too, there's probably cringy moments reading.
Definitely. Very much so. Like, oh my gosh, how could
why did
happen?
I do that?
Right.
Yes. But it's there's something really beautiful about that though, because you can see in a moment of time how you reacted to something and how you've changed over these years. Of if that were to happen again, that's not how you would approach that. And wow, look how much I grew, and all the things that you can learn about just being a human. And we're never going to be perfect. Right.
Right. Yeah. Just all the red flags that people waved at me that I neglected to notice because, well, I wanted to make the relationship work, or I wanted to be married. And so forget the red flags, that sort of thing. But watching it as if I were just a disinterested viewer, I'm like, come on, notice that. But at the time I didn't notice it.
Yeah. So let's go back into like your story, besides the journal piece, like as you were living, were you pulled to all these different things? Were you forcing yourself into certain things to like get uncomfortable? Were you pushing against the system? Was there any of that, like, or was this kind of just a happenstance journey that you went on?
I don't think it was
Which is a
happenstance.
very rude question, but
I think I would really yearn for connection, and
okay.
And so I was trying to find it in, meditation and journaling. There are all these ways I was connecting, maybe because I didn't feel I had that deep connection with a husband or children. So I had to find that connection in some other way. And, I was working at home alone for 5 years, and I had to have this whole 2-hour regime before I woke up so I could feel connected and not so lonely that I couldn't do my job at home,
Right.
So I had a whole curriculum of what to do to feel connected.
Like self-care and
well, it was
like
journaling for an hour, meditating
right.
30 minutes, psychic exercises. I mean,
Wow.
You name it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we all find our ways to feel that connection. I think that's really important to say out loud. I think that we have to find those things that are our comfort, that are our grounding, or whatever we want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really curious about what your life was like the week before the fire. Like, who were you then?
Mm-hmm. Well, interesting. The week before the fire, I had broken up with a fiance. I'd forsworn dating for a while so I could take care of myself. I was just enjoying my home in Santa Monica, and I had quit working at the convent. And so there were I'd crashed my car like a month before. So there was a lot of destruction in my life that it was almost like God lit a match the finale will be to burn down your house. That'll be the perfect, complete burning down of every aspect of your life as it is.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I was going to say, did you have, and I felt this before in my life, but did you have this sense of like, or this inkling of knowing like you needed to burn it all down to start anew in some way?
I don't think I had that level of insight.
Okay.
No, I was just
it just
trying
happened.
to cope.
It was just a lot of things falling apart, probably for good in some instances,
Mm-hmm.
and allowing you to find the base. And then they were like, okay, well, the universe was like, why don't we give you one last test and then we'll show you what really matters, because what really matters is what's left, which if we're looking at it here, it's you.
Right. Yeah. That's all that was left. Right.
It was you and then like manifestations of you through your journals or through your diaries that you had. I think that's really interesting because I think a lot of people have felt that way. Like everything, did it feel like things were a little out of control in that
They
month before?
did. They felt like I didn't have a leg to stand on, like I was in
Mm,
a house with rotted floorboards. Wherever I stepped, my foot went through the floorboards.
yeah. And then did you, when you saw that your books were standing, I'm sure the whole thing was a big shock, but eventually did it feel more calm? Like, did you have a different feeling about yourself as you started reading those, or?
Well, I mean, it was fascinating, like reading a novel that you can hardly wait to find out what happens next. And so I think it was like a little gift after the destruction of here is your pathway out of the destruction, volume by volume. And yeah, I moved in with my brother. That's in the book. You know, it was sort of this wild and crazy Hollywood bachelor. And so all of a sudden, overnight, through no effort of my own, my life took a great turn. I mean, a turn, excuse me, that was a good one.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's interesting when life hands us things that, because you could have seen it and go, ugh, you know, like, it's just my books. Why didn't this survive the fire?
Right. I mean, it's interesting. Everyone said, I'm so sorry, Laurie, for your loss. The insurance agent, my parents are so sorry. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not sorry. I'm
Mm,
not sorry at all, because it was like, I just want to walk away from my life and start fresh.
yeah. And did you feel
And
like you did?
and I did. Everything in my life, every single aspect of my life changed overnight,
Wow.
because I moved in with my brother. So I was, instead of living alone, I was living with the wild and crazy Hollywood bachelor with his many dogs. And I started a new career. And so everything became really good quickly.
Really? And
Yeah.
did it kind of slough off some of the loneliness that you were feeling and some of the self-hatred and all the pieces that we somehow bring along like baggage?
Definitely. I didn't realize how much bandwidth living alone took up until I lived with my brother and I didn't have to deal with isolation.
Mm.
I didn't really get that until I lived with him. And so all of a sudden I had 500 volts more of energy to apply to my life to reinvent myself, energy that I had not had before.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you remember that first time that you like looked at yourself and you were like, I feel different?
Well, it's interesting. A friend said, Laurie, have you had some work done in LA? People say that
Right.
a lot. Have you had work done? Because everyone has plastic surgery in LA. But I said, no, I'll tell you what the work I've had done is. It's what's known as happiness. That's the work
Mm,
I've had done. And so my whole face changed shape, and my skin changed.
wow.
So I could tell that, as my mother said, skin doesn't lie. My skin changed. So
Yeah.
I could tell I was on the right path.
And it's interesting that you found happiness even though you were with yourself before. That was a loneliness, but now you're with yourself in a different way and you find happiness, which is so interesting how things can just kind of flip on a dime because of certain circumstances, or we see something differently and then that creates a snowball
Yes.
effect.
Definitely. I mean, it was a gift. A lot of people, when there's a big life shift, they're like, oh, I want things to go back the way they were. I really yearned for the way things were before. Instead of saying, you know what, this is an opportunity to go to open a door fresh and quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And
Because
that's
you had
the
to.
way you had to, right?
Yeah, you were, I mean, first of all, you had to find a place to live, right? So you found you moved in
My
with your
brother,
brother.
right? My brother's bachelor pad, right?
And sometimes just the change of scenery and location can help someone break out of, the habits and the things that we assume. Because I will tell you, having had depressive moments in my life through grief, losing my mom, it's so much easier to stay in that sense for me, at least. Like if I'm feeling down, it's so much easier for me to just embrace that, put on sad music, turn off the lights, like it's so much easier to be there than it is to move into happiness, knowing full well that I can get there, but it's a lot of work. Did you feel that it was a lot of
Yeah,
work?
yeah. Well, it just seemed kind of effortless, but I mean, I realized that I had gotten so accustomed to loneliness and depression that it became my status quo. And I didn't really know I didn't even know I felt it. It was just, that's the way it was. And until it stopped being that way. And then, so I think you're right. There's a tendency to gravitate toward the familiar, which often is not the best, instead of gravitating toward something really fresh and different that may be scary, but is better for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then you found this happiness, which you just said was kind of effortless for you. And that
Mm-hmm.
must feel really different and weird, but also wonderful to be in that state.
Right. It was almost like I didn't have to do anything. It's like the universe did it for me. And that there was that oddness of usually everyone says you've got to work for change and pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But I didn't have to do that. It was instant. It was just
You're like, all you need is a neighbor to cook her fries for too long and you get this. But I mean, let's be fair. You put in a lot of work. Like, it's as much as we want to say it was effortless, you still have to make those choices. You still have to choose to look at those books, right? To choose to be curious about who you were, who you are, who you were becoming, so there's a lot of work there.
there is a lot of work. It demands an openness and curiosity that some people have, some maybe not, but because to change, you really have to be open to something that's scarily odd and not outside your bandwidth and outside your safety zone. And that can be a hard step.
So you're reading, you said a volume
Per night, right?
Every night. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're reading these, you're learning about yourself, you're cringing at certain moments, you're smiling, you're laughing at other moments. You probably had some ridiculous moments mixed in there. At what point in reading your story did you say, okay, now I'm going to share my story with the world? Because that's a big leap, right?
Well, I was in a writing class and I had to write a story every week. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I was working full time and I didn't have a lot of time to think. And I'm like, why don't you go to your journals and write about a romance, And so each week it was a romance. And finally, after a year of writing class, I had like 50 romances. And my publishing house that I eventually went with said, you really need to weave this outside romance. Romance can be part of it, but we need your spiritual journey, your career journey, your financial journey, and then it'll make a whole book. And so I had to learn how to do the arc of change and have me as a character and learn how to form a book. And that was good to force me to look at my arc of change over a 20-year period. How did I change?
Yeah.
Or did I,
Did you? Yes.
I did, but there was, it was a lot of wheel spinning for sure. I mean, because I was like trying to find the one and my perfect, perfect spirit soulmate. And it was just, one very cinematic romance after another, which is in the book. And, but I realized that when I was reading these books, that there were many people guiding me toward where I should go. They were my soulmates in the sense of not being my husband, but being people who showed me what my soul really needed. So I called them my soulmates. And they were all saying, Laurie, you really are good with words as a counselor, as a writer, and healing people. And that's where you really need to be going. And multiple people said that, whether they be boyfriends or teachers and so as I was reading these volumes, you saw the theme repeated, but I wasn't acting on that theme. I wasn't acting on what they said to me. So that was where the aha moment came was, okay, here's your sacred contract, but are you following it? If not, how could you?
Yeah. But so these are all in your journals. Now you're putting was it nerve-wracking to put your personal stories out to the world, or is that a calling for you that like, your story can help other people? Like, what was that like? Because you have this period of loneliness, right? Like you felt lonely. Seems like the antithesis of that is sharing your story with the world.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I started researching the whole process of journaling, and Professor Pennebaker, who's a University of Texas, Austin professor, former psychology professor, said that he studied journaling and about how confessing even the darkest, deepest secrets is incredibly healing. And he actually did a blood test on people doing polygraphs, and as they shared their truth, their white blood cell count changed in a good way. And so he saw that confessing, even though the ugly, the good, the bad, the ugly, that it was incredibly healing. And so I looked at writing my memoir like that, yeah, my Uncle Mike in Columbus might be embarrassed about what he's reading, but nonetheless, the embarrassment is less than what I think the value of sharing it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is so much power in storytelling, which you learned through the diaries, but then being a witness to your own story by reading them is probably a whole other thing. And then
yeah,
not rewriting, but like using them to write something new is a whole other layer that a lot of people don't experience. Like, what did you learn about yourself in the actual writing of that? Like,
well, I had to study story structure, and it's interesting because as a psychologist, you start out and you have all these challenges and obstacles and the arc of change is overcoming them, and then you're transformed at the end of the book. And so I had to, by writing the memoir, have to see and articulate, well, how did you transform, and where are you now that you weren't at the beginning? So the story structure forced me to look at my arc of change like a novelist or a psychologist, and
right.
That was the advantage of writing the memoir.
Yeah. Is there any imposter syndrome that comes with that?
Meaning like, I'm not worthy of writing the story,
or my story it doesn't fit the arc that I need, and I'm pushing something in. Like, I feel like that's
Jimmy
how
Hooking.
I would feel.
Oh, you mean like forcing things in to fit the structure?
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people have asked that, like, did you really have that, did you really replace the marital vow with the sacred vow? And not entirely. I still am open to relationships, but it did give me a sense of having a purpose beyond being a wife and mother. Like, well, what is your purpose? Beyond career, but, what is your purpose in life? And so it gave me a ballast, something that, as opposed to constantly searching for the marital vow and not quite finding it and being in a state of lack and sadness because of that,
Yeah. Yeah. I just think of myself and I know for my journey that, like, sure, there's arcs, but I think I would probably feel like I was faking something in my story. And, maybe it's not true, but that's just me doubting that it's good enough. Like, my story is good enough for the world. So that's where that question came from.
Okay.
My own insecurities. They come along with it.
Well, I've been getting feedback because my book just came out a few weeks ago, and people say, "Oh my gosh, it's like like a thriller. Your life is like a thriller, and I can't believe how odd the people were who you met." And so I'm getting validation from my readers that your life was a thriller. It was like an adventure story, and so it may not have fit the American template of what a woman should become, but it was my own template.
Yeah, we throw that template away. Who needs that anymore?
I'm right. It's kind of old fashioned, but you can tell my age by that.
It certainly is. And I think there are a lot of things that we have assumed as society that we should be. Like, for me, with a dead mom as a boy, it was very much clear that I only had a certain time period in which I was allowed to cry or be sad. Right. There were certain things I wasn't allowed to miss her, because if I mentioned that to anyone, then I was weak or not well. And then I had to be perfect, because then I thought if I wasn't perfect, then my dad was going to leave, because my mom left, because my 8-year-old brain sees death as leaving. All of that. But society keeps those guardrails on, right? Like, no one was actually, now they would probably, but back in the 80s and 90s, they weren't. They were like, yeah, you're right. Keep all that under wraps. That's nobody's business but your own. And now I think people be like, how are you feeling? Like,
yes,
you are a wounded soul. And so 20 years of me going through that formed this version of me, which I am grateful for. But I could have saved myself from all of that. My
Yeah, a
story
lot
would be
of
less
pain.
interesting, but you know,
Yes, right. So you adjusted to that in a way that maybe was painful, as opposed to maybe
but
having
it's
a
but it's
therapist go.
all about, yeah, it's, I mean, I probably had a school counselor or something that didn't really know how to help me at that point either. But it's all the idea of the template. Like I pulled out the template of kid with a dead mom, you know, and like I followed that template because that's what we had. And the expectations of me were built on what I thought society wanted for me, just as you did. As a woman in society, these were the things that you thought society needed you to do. And I think we're finding out more as we learn about the people around us, especially through the life shift and all the people I get to talk to. I can't tell you many of these people followed some kind of template. We, but I can tell you that a lot of them thought they had to follow a particular template.
Interesting. Yeah.
But when they found themselves, they realized it wasn't a template. And so it's very similar to your story of like, you finally came to maybe peace with the fact that your story is different, and that's okay.
hmm Right. That I had to create my own paradigm
Yeah.
because the paradigm I did attempt to follow failed me terribly. And I think right now in our world, there's a huge amount of template changing, a lot of paradigm, whether it's the labor market, the economy, capitalism. It's there's a huge amount of shift. And so I don't feel so badly that I'm not like everyone else because the world doesn't seem that functional right now. So
Well, and dare
I'm
I say that you might be in a big community of people just like yourself, just of different ages and different, you know, like lots of people are choosing this path that you felt, you know, that you're pulled on and that you didn't, you know, they're not fulfilling whatever, they're just fulfilling what they just want to live. We get, for most of us, we don't know if we get more than one alive over here. So I haven't experienced more than one that I know of. So why not live it the way we want to? And that doesn't include that loneliness and the sadness that both of us have gone through in our lives. And, you know, here we are showing up, and now you have your story. One, your story can inspire you to continue and do what you need to do and live your life in the way that feels most aligned. But now people can read your story, not necessarily follow your path, but be inspired by different parts of your path or the different things that you leaned into. Do you feel that power right now that your book is out into the world?
I'm trying to feel that power. You know, that because I was a counselor for 17 years, which is very direct helping another person across the desk from you. But and so a memoir, it's the direct help is not as clear, but the motivation is still there to heal with words, be it as a counselor or as a memoirist. And hearing back from people, that helps to see what impact I've had on my readers. So I just think that, I think Oprah once said, writing your memoir is way better than therapy. And I think
Do you agree?
I agree with that. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, I mean, I think there is, I have gone to therapy and I found it very helpful. And I have found in my 30s, I found the breakthrough with a therapist that I needed that kind of cleared the way for me to heal. But there is something about hearing someone else's story. Just by hearing, something validates your own experience that then inspires you because you feel validated to move into the new step on your own. Whereas in a therapist, there's a lot of unpacking with intention, right? There's a lot of like, oh, you should think about it like that. Whereas discovering it on your own, I feel like there's so much power in that to move forward. And so the butterfly or effect of people reading your memoir, feeling changed, then they act differently, show up in the world differently, which then someone else witnesses that and create, like
Right. The butterfly effect. Right.
there's so much that can come from your memoir and you'll never know, which is also kind of beautiful in its own way.
Interesting. Yeah. I think the agency, of writing your own story, it gives you a sense that, yeah, I can address my own problems on my own without paying $250 an hour. And also when you journal, you have an immediate transcript of your therapy session that you can read from years for years to come. So it does give you a sense of, you know what, maybe you have the answers your own problems yourself. And let's try that and see how that works.
Did you feel closure when you finished it? Did you feel like a complete, or did you feel like this is a to be continued? Like, how did you look upon your life as you finished the memoir piece? Because it sometimes kind of feels like an end.
Well, interesting you should ask, because I began my second memoir on the very day that I ended my first memoir. So I just, that's coming out in July of 2027, where I actually put into action my sacred contract, Heal with Words. So the second book is about what happened with that,
That's awesome.
What became of me, and did it work?
What do you feel like? How do you feel today? I know we talked about it briefly, but like, how do you feel about you, yourself, your life, what you're doing today?
I feel like now that I'm not having to like adapt to a abusive boss or coworkers that could ghost my emails that I'm more clear about what I want and what I'm willing to put up with. So my boundaries are clear. I'm not as willing to accommodate like I used to. So as I'm dig myself more clearly in my memoirs, I have more of a sense of who I am and what I accept and what I don't, and what behavior I will accept and what I won't. And so I'm more of a less amorphous, more of a clear character.
Yeah. That must be freeing in its own way.
It is. I mean, in the past, I think I accommodated because I was so needing to win friends and influence people, and whatever you need, I'll do it for you. And I became kind of not a doormat, but let's say not a doormat so much as a sidelined person, that I was just playing second fiddle to everyone around me, as opposed to, being a main character, hanging out with another main character. And
right.
So I'm not a sidekick anymore.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, could we all get there as soon as possible in our lives to feel that? But
right.
Also, you might not feel this way had you not played the role that you played for so long, right?
To see the contrast, right? That's
right.
true.
Like, I don't know. Like, for me, losing a parent was very hard. It was very sudden. Obviously, it was an accident. And had I not had that kind of experience, like, I wouldn't have realized how important it was to have a different experience when my grandmother was dying. Like, the contrast of losing someone slowly to a disease versus losing someone where I couldn't say anything, didn't know anything. Like, there was such a contrast there. Whereas if my mom hadn't died and then it feels like everything would have been different. So there is something about that comparison piece that comes along with it. But I don't want to, I am who I am because of all the things I went through. You are who you are because of all the things you went through, whether we want to,
right.
whether we want to admit that or not.
Yes, that's for sure.
How does being a caregiver now change you?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the more I'm able to, write and keep that part of my life going, the more I'm able to, weather the slings and arrows of caring for someone who's older. And so, but if I neglect my journaling and meditation and my memoirs, then I become a little bit more affected. And so it's a real lesson for me that as long as I keep my own foundation, I can be a good caregiver because I have my own thing and I can care for it. So I guess the more I sink into my writing and spiritual practice, the more firm my foundation is. And so I'm not batted back and forth by the slings and arrows of caregiving.
Yeah. It's really just another example of that whole put your oxygen mask on first.
Oh, right. Yes.
Right. Like,
right.
It's so cliche, but so many of us for lots of our lives don't put that on first. And we don't realize that if we're good, we're going to be better for the people around us.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We just sacrifice everything.
Right. If the caregiver is not caring for themselves, what good are they? They become just a mess. So, right. And a lot of people don't know they can care for someone else, but don't have a clue about how to care for their own selves.
Yeah. It's a lot harder.
That's a little harder. Right.
Yeah. No, I love that. If this version of you could bump into the version of you about to see the destruction of your house as you hadn't seen your books left. Is there anything that you would want to tell to that Laurie walking up to your
Oh,
house?
I think I would say, you know what, you've got everything you need. You don't need the fiance. You don't need the car, the condo. You've got it all right here inside you, and be proud of that, and take advantage of it to pull yourself into the new dimension.
Yeah.
That you don't need all the accoutrements that our society says we need.
Yeah. Do you think she would have listened?
Uh, maybe. I don't know. I think it's one of those things you've got to learn on the ground.
I agree.
You know.
I agree. These are silly questions. These aren't things that we can do, but it's always interesting to see how we care for those other versions of ourselves.
Interesting. Yeah. Writing a letter to your younger self. What would you say to her or him? Yeah.
Yeah. I've done that. It was very
You
interesting. Yeah.
You have. Okay.
Yeah. It was, there's a lot of care and compassion for that kid who took the world on because he thought he had to. And I was like, man, if I could just tell him to be a kid, it's okay, but can't do it. But so if people want to get your book, they want to learn more about you, they want to connect with you, they want to tell you how your story affected them or validated their own experiences, what's the best way to find you, get in your orbit?
Well, I'm on Amazon, and you can just type in my name, Laurie Collister, or the name of the book, which is A Different Kind of Vow. Or I have a website, lauriecollister.com, and I have a contact thing where you can, write a little note to me and send it to me. So those are the two ways. Laurie Collister. I guess my name is on the front of your. Okay.
Yep. And we'll put those links easy in the show notes in the description.
Okay.
So people will be
good.
able to just click on them. And I encourage people to check out your books, but I also encourage people to connect. And because I know how much power there is when someone shares something with someone else for the first time, or tells someone else, hey, this is how your story connects with mine. There's something powerful about telling your story or saying it out loud or writing it for the first time. And there are a lot of people holding on to those things, and they don't need to. They can, things are a lot messier in my head. And when I put them on paper or write them out, everything kind of sorts itself out and feels more palatable. So
yes,
I'd imagine it happens to other people too. So
definitely.
Selfishly, I'm asking people to reach out to you and let you know how either this conversation or your book and your story affected them, and look out for your next book next year as well. So I just appreciate you coming on this conversation ride with me and being willing to answer sometimes silly questions that pop into this curious 45-year-old mind.
Well, it was a pleasure, Matt, and you asked excellent questions.
Well, you can tell me what you really think when we're done recording here, but I do appreciate you. It's such a pleasure to be able to learn about people in this way instead of, reading is great, but to be able to have these conversations, I kind of picture the life shift is if someone listening is kind of eavesdropping on two strangers that are now friends because they've had this more intimate type conversation. So thanks for coming on this ride with me.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Such a pleasure.
Well, I will, I send that back to you as well. And I will say thank you. And I'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Thanks again. Thank you for listening to the Life Shift Podcast. If you want to learn more, go to www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com. There you can check out all the different episodes. You can check out the blog, some of the reviews for the podcast, and the Life Shift Journal. Links are there so you can purchase your own copy, whether in digital or print format. Thanks again.